Good afternoon, Mr. Aladdin.
Good afternoon, sir.
Thank you for taking the time to meet here with me today to discuss with your paper airplane
Mhm.
physics lessons. I want to ensure that we have I want to ensure that we have a thorough discussion with what I observed and highlighting both strengths and areas where I think we might need a little bit of enhancement.
Okay.
So let me start by sharing what that I appreciate the overall lesson that you did.
Mhm.
Your paper airplane contest was excellent, designed to help students understand complex physics concepts through the hands-on experimentation. I did notice that you did take time at the beginning to establish clear connections before the activity and the physics standards around speed, acceleration, drag, and so forth. So the classroom environment that you created was very conducive to learning. Students appeared comfortable taking risks with their designs, and there was a positive energy throughout the room. And I particularly noticed how you arranged the desk to create kind of adequate testing space will allow for collaborative work. And even when needed, had to take it out into the hallway as well. So the one thing I'm curious about is how did you feel about the overall student engagement with students during this activity?
Well, for this particular lesson, I actually saw that they were engaged in conversation that was prevalent to what the lesson was about as compared to what they were to do that weekend. So I was happy to see that the engagement was focused on what the lesson or the concept being taught was as compared to everything around it.
So was there anything that was kind of surprising, like something that they were doing?
Well, I guess the surprising thing I found was that students were more excited about, well, going the farthest was one of them, but also when it came to design, since I said I was going to give extra points, and I did go through with that on whoever had the best design. And of course, I did want to try and make it a bit fair for everybody, so I made it unanimous, and I made it for different class periods so that they weren't voting for their class period, because obviously you set it up that way, there's instances to be people voting for themselves. But I mixed and matched them around, and I did a Google form, and thankfully, like I said, the students were really proud of the designs, and they really went out of their way to make it unique, distinctive, and show their own self-expression.
Nice. Okay, so moving on to the analysis from the organization. So, excuse me, your data collection process.
Mhm.
So I thought your worksheets that were clearly structured.
Mhm.
The students knew exactly where to record their flight distance, time, and their speed calculations. The template that you provided helped standardize data collection, which is crucial for scientific, inquiry. So I noticed that students were able to complete their data recording independently, which speaks to the clarity of your instructions and worksheet design. The columns for multiple trials encourage the scientific practice of repeating testing. Now, one area I think could be considered for enhancing
Mhm.
would be the data visualization component. So while there were some students, right, that recorded their data effectively, there was limited opportunity for them to see the patterns across the entire class results. So maybe something like a digital platform like Google Sheets or something like that, or a simple class chart would allow students to aggregate the findings and identify broader trends.
Mhm.
So, is there any tools or methods that you've considered for collective dating analysis for like past lessons or something like
To accumulate data, you know what? That would have been a good idea. I should have had a Google Sheets. Maybe for the next time when I have this lesson again, I'll revamp it with that in mind, just so that there is like you said, a clear pattern that students can identify with these concepts, especially when it comes down to aerodynamics. Which paper airplanes went the farthest, and why was the reason they did the best? And yeah, like I said, I didn't really have anything in terms of like class-oriented data as compared. I mean, really, what I had them do was discuss at the end of class after the project had already been finished. But I should have done something like that to actually compare the numerical data or the quantitative data rather than just being discussion.
Well, I mean, of course, it's just a recommendation. That doesn't
Yeah,
mean
yeah.
that it has to be that way. Which while you were giving your lesson, you did present, of course, videos with plane structures and examples of weighing currently explaining, the efficient of drag, how mathematically or scientifically flight works and all that. So I know that you use some digital applications for that. Is there anything, a digital tool that you plan for experimentation as far as with data visualization?
Not currently, but that's something I need to work on because, like I said, having class data and having it compared to not just from person to person, from class to class, and maybe I'm sure I'll be teaching this lesson again throughout the years. That would be something good for students to look back on, maybe even show them that data beforehand, so they can have an idea as to what their goals and results should look like. So when it happens to them, they have that eureka moment that, oh, okay, well, this person got this set of data, and um, hopefully their design could either mimic it or even surpass that, or at the very least reach within the realm of that range.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, of course, I'm only mentioning, of course, digital data just so that way, obviously, with the advances that we make, if you have your paper, of course, you can see obviously certain patterns. But with some of the platforms that we have now, of course, that you have used yourself, um, you get set it up in a way where you're punching in your data, right? Whatever it is, flight time, acceleration, drag, such and so forth, that you're able to then modify that to then present it as a way like a graph
Oh, okay,
or like
yeah.
a chart.
As like a calculation. Okay.
So in that way they could kind of see the pattern like a little bit quicker. Which I'm not saying, of course, that you can't see it on paper.
Yeah.
You can. But this is something I feel that maybe with today's kids, they might be able to get it a little bit, better. And of course, it might be a little bit, not so much easier, but maybe a little bit more efficient. So in that way, you set it up so that you have, once you punch in all your numbers, you kind of, then a chart or a display will come out, like a line graph. Then that way, those kids could see those patterns a lot better. Like, okay, obviously, if I change my current weight to drag ratio or whatever, longer wing on the plane or such and such, that way they could see those patterns a little bit better. So
No,
it's
I
just
agree.
so it's just a recommendation, just to further enhance it. Of course, it's not that you have to have that. Of course.
Thank you. I'll look into that, doctor. I appreciate that.
Okay, then moving on to analysis and your pre-analysis. So the way that you guided your students through the and analyzing their flight data demonstrated good attention to scientific thinking process. I observed that the students were making connections between design features and flight performance, which is precisely the kind of analytical thinking that this lesson aims to develop. Your questioning strategies during the analysis phase were very, very effective. When you asked students, okay, what did you notice about the planes that flew the furthest, and how did the wind shape affect stability? These are questions that required more deeper reflection, which is obviously that's grade A, stuff. So looking ahead, I would just suggest maybe consider differentiated extension activities for students who quickly master the basic concepts. Because obviously, the way it is for every class, you can't help it. You have your kids that are very, very sharp and they could get it, super duper quickly, compared to some other ones that might take a little bit of time, as well. So some students, right, they finish their initial analysis early and probably could have benefited from exploring more complex variables like air resistance, coefficients, or center of gravity calculations. So I'm just curious of how do you typically address the varying pace at which students complete activities like that?
For addressing depth of knowledge, that's something I should have, especially when it comes to designing any new lesson, it's something that should be kind of thought of within the foundation of it. I did, I'll admit, I did severely lack that because, as you said, yeah, Certain students work at a better rate than others, and some students were, like I said, had prior knowledge, or most students, I thought most students would have prior knowledge. There's some that still needed some ample facilitation, but um, the way I guess I could have addressed it better would be, whew, hmm. I guess I could have had them calculate what air resistance could have been, or how much it could have affected their design, as compared to just doing the simple basics of speed, velocity, acceleration, and not to mention maybe have them account for as well gravity. I mean, obviously, depending on what your, I had them just typically throw it same way you would throw it, just straight ahead. But how could the angle of that airplane maybe would have either brought it down faster or kept it in the air longer? So I guess maybe adding questions that could have pertained to other factors that obviously we can't account for, especially in a system that this isn't in a vacuum, that add or take away from the flight time.
Yeah, of course. I mean, again, I'm not saying that your lesson was nowhere near, superior or anything like that. Of course, this is just recommendations that we usually make because obviously you don't have the same level of students, for every class. You know what I mean? So it's not something that you officially maybe want to create more work for other students. It's just that in the system that we have, of course, we do have GT students, do have maybe some early college students that could probably benefit, from having that differentiated instruction, where, okay, just like you said, you know what, for them specifically, I should probably maybe add a little bit more questions are going to be a little bit more deeper reflection. Not that there's anything wrong with the way that you already did it, I mean, it's just something to kind of think about when you're designing your course, so then that way, again, not that it was bad or inferior, but just to really try to get the best out of every single kid that you have right there. So you did kind of briefly mention on it, but have you considered any specific extension activities that might deepen the experience for these advanced students?
I kind of dabbled a little bit for the lesson using FET simulations, especially when talking about the potential and different types of energy or kinetic and all that.
Potential and
I guess I could have seen maybe if there was something that could have involved just the concepts, but like I said, in a perfect world where those factors are the only ones, the ones that they were testing for or trying to calculate for, were the only variables. I know that's an issue that constantly plagues science, is that nothing's ever as ideal, and therefore, I mean, you constantly have to fight against however variables are just unaccounted for. And so that's something I didn't really, I guess I for the lack of a better word, didn't prep for. So something I guess that should be addressed and just to build upon.
well, of course, I mean, this is all just to better help you improve, as a teacher as well. So, reflecting, your lesson clearly addressed the main three competency six standards, which is regarding data informed instruction. Excuse me. You constantly monitor your student understanding by circulating throughout the classroom, which I thought was, your power zoning, checking in with teams during both the construction and the testing phases. At one particular point, I observed that was your ability to address misconceptions as far as real time. So, for example, you had a group in the back corner that assumed that heavier planes would automatically fly further. You guided them to test that hypothesis rather than simply, correcting. So this approach is nurture scientific, thinking. It wasn't just to clear, hey, you're wrong, don't do that. You piqued their scientific curiosity by, okay, you know what, test it out, really quickly with this scientific hypothesis, which that's the whole basis with science instructions. I also witnessed basically that aha moment, right? When students made the connection between the wing design and the flight stability. So the excitement was very palpable as they began to redesign based on their observations rather than just by trial and error.
Mhm.
So as a key takeaway, I suggest implementing a more structured peer evaluation protocol,
Mhm.
just to kind of help out just a little bit. So while students are naturally observing others' designs, there could be something like a formalized process that might help them to articulate what they're learning from their peers. So perhaps maybe a simple notice and wonder protocol between flight tests would maybe strengthen this aspect. And of course, this is just a recommendation. Um, Additionally, I think making more explicit connections to mathematical concepts would enhance the cross-curricular value um, of this already strong lesson. Like again, I mean, your whole lesson was already super strong. I'm just trying to give you a recommendation so that we stays there and or maybe even improves there for other students as well. So like the calculations of speed are there, but you might also incorporate maybe a little bit more ratios, maybe a little bit more averages. Some basic statistics for with flight distance data. So how do you feel about incorporating that more kind of peer feedback for future lessons?
I think that's a good idea. You know what? I had made it more of discussion, but I made it more qualitative data when they were discussing, also, oh, okay, so what did you do to change your design? That would have been better. But I should have made it more numerical in the fact that, yeah, you know what, obviously design plays a good part in that. What was the numbers? What did the numbers look like? What was their flight time? What was their speed? Was their acceleration different? Um, so I should have focused on the mathematical equations that the students could have compared with their peers, and I could have had that been a separate form to add to the lab grade um, that they could have approved upon, or if they maybe leave it as a discussion part of their lab report where, okay, we did such and such, but this is where we could have improved upon, or what we could have changed that would have led to giving us this type of data as compared to the data results we saw.
So, do you see maybe any other cross-curricular connections that you think might be a natural fit for this?
Hmm.
Which, I mean, you don't have to.
No,
Just
I'm
curious.
sure I could think of it, especially with physics. That is cut into a lot of things. Shoot. You know what? Especially when it comes to design aspects, engineering actually comes to mind. Especially when it comes to, I forget the word, but especially with boat trains in Japan, they mimic it in the shape of a beak of a bird, if I'm mistaken, or something of a, I want to say like a kingfisher. So it has more aerodynamic as it's gliding through the railroad. And that's something I could have maybe brought up. That way we could mimic nature's design because some of it's already perfected upon. I mean, it's a reason why we kind of try and keep, or we try and steal designs that we see naturally occurring in nature to implement in our engineering practices because it's something that is naturally occurring and works. So maybe that's something I could have, in terms of cross-curricular, incorporate maybe just some bio, because technically that would be bioengineering technically. Obviously not bioengineering, but
Yeah.
maybe those two separate subjects.
Well, even something to a degree, even sports as well.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you could talk
Absolutely.
about with some of the designs, with like the balls, of course. Like I know
Football.
for like football course, I know for a fact with golf balls,
Mhm.
if you're familiar with them, right, they have dimples on it,
Mhm.
and apparently those dimples are what actually help to kind of stabilize and actually create more flight control, from what I heard.
Honestly, I've always wondered why there was. I guess I should have figured out it has to do with something, right?
Well,
It
yeah,
wasn't
but it
just
just doesn't make any sense because you
Yeah.
look at other, balls and it's like, okay, they don't have dimples, so
Yeah.
what's the deal here? Okay, so the overall quality and some of the next steps that we could take here. So overall, again, your lesson plan and your execution were of superior quality. The instructions were very clear. The pacing was appropriate. The learning objectives were very, very clear. Clearly met. Students demonstrated understanding of the target concepts while engaged in a meaningful and enjoyable activity. Um, My suggestion to enhance further interactions of this lesson are considering to create, like I said, that digital kind of platform to be able to have the designs for patterns. This could even be used as a reference point for subsequent lessons and allow students to see their progression in the understanding of over time. Um, I would just say maybe incorporate some more structured reflection, develop some more explicit connections, like we just said right now, between the physics vocabulary, which I thought it was good, but maybe just a couple more, create some, maybe some more challenges, implement that system that we talked about with the feedback for their peers. Um, and so, I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of these suggestions, which of these any resonates with you as far as the areas to focus for your professional growth.
They're all great suggestions, especially like you said, the peer feedback is something that I should look into and implement, as well as the digital patterns, because that's especially with sciences, right? If you could if it happens if it happens over and over again, there's something that you're trying to implement or you're trying to do, and there's a way to have either those numbers go up and down, and there's something that's controlling that. Especially when it comes to connections too, I mean, there's plenty of students who are into sports, and once you start speaking their language, they'll be all in. And especially when it comes to engineering, I should have, like I said, kind of talked about that. Now I need to find out that word. It's driving me crazy. But the mimicry, and not to mention, talk about how this can be used, or I kind of delved a little bit into it, of like the actual applications, because obviously we talked about the design of airplanes and how steel can fly or aluminum can fly. So yeah, no, these are great suggestions, and I will implement them for going ahead with this lesson for next year.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right.
And very good.
Okay, thank you, Doctor.
Yes, sir.